So I'm a structural engineer for United Launch Alliance. I do strength analysis for the Vulcan launch system. So being an employee at United Launch Alliance is really great. I love my job. I come into work every day excited to do what I do, to be able to work on building rockets, building a launch system, being able to do something that matters and puts payloads and satellites in space that are important to people and to the country's military assets and all sorts of different things.
And one of the, obviously one of the things that is important when you talk about the practice of law in the aerospace industry, a lot of people ask me what is space law, and there are several answers I could give. One is space law is a collection of treaties that govern the conduct of companies and human beings in outer space. Because one of the fundamental principles of the Outer Space Treaty, for example, is that no one owns outer space. It is designed for the development and the benefit of all mankind, and while that sounds good in principle, it's a little harder in practice to really define what that means, particularly if you are a private company that's invested a tremendous amount of money to get into space and develop, let's say, in years to come, develop a mining operation on the moon. Well, if the moon doesn't belong to anybody, then how do you lay claim to the minerals that you're extracting? And that's a pretty mundane example, but actually it's a very realistic one and a question that people are still grappling with.
NASA's primary goal is to send humans to Mars, and this is something that is going to happen in the next generation. So children that are now in school and college are going to be able to work on space vehicles that are going to Mars in their career, in their lifetime. So it's a very exciting time for the next generation.
Lowering the cost in a commercial environment has turned out to be very valuable to our end users. Not only do we make a profit as a commercial developer of large geosynchronous communication spacecraft, they're purchased by people who need to earn money from that. What that means is any technology that we come up with needs to be very reliable, but it needs to provide, if they're going to pay for it, it needs to provide an economic incentive. Solar electric propulsion, primarily the ones that we use are Hall thrusters, have been shown to reduce the amount of propellant that a spacecraft needs to take on board to keep up there and do its job. This started out about a decade ago with very low thrust, Russian-made thrusters that would allow us to keep the spacecraft in one place. As a spacecraft is in orbit around the planet, small interactions from the moon, from the sun, small disturbances will push it away, and so we need to do what's called station keeping. It turns out that solar electric propulsion, because it's a very low, gentle thrust, and using xenon, does that very efficiently. And so instead of maybe carrying a couple hundred kilograms of fuel to keep that spacecraft in place, maybe now we can cut that in a fraction. And if you can cut that mass down, you don't have to put it on the launch vehicle, you don't have to put it up into space, and you end up saving money. But you do have to buy that new system, that electric propulsion. So it needs to be economical, and there has to be no chance that it's going to work. We've been successful in doing that over 10 years, and now we're ready to introduce our second generation, a 3 times more powerful ion engine that is capable of not just keeping the spacecraft in place, but actually moving it around a little bit, doing orbit raising. So now we can look at that capability and say, what if all you want to do is do transportation? And so our work recently has been taking the capability that the commercial world has perfected for low-cost station keeping and now orbit raising, and let's say all we want to do is use that for transportation, not the transportation up into deep space, but to move around the solar system. And that's the work that we've been recently doing. Go ahead.
Is we're preserving the history of the earliest Mars mission, which was the Viking mission. And we're also comparing that to the missions that have happened subsequent to them and talking about how that journey through technology and peer-to-peer influence has changed the cultural, economic, scientific, and technological basis of every country in the world.
So dust is a major issue on Moon and Mars. It gets on solar rays, radiators, spacesuit material. It gets on visors and scratches it. It is very abrasive and very fine and hard to get rid of. NASA has invented some technology called the electrodynamic dust shield, and essentially it creates an electric shield that repulses the dust off of planetary surface systems. The interesting thing, though, is that NASA right now is not going to the moon because NASA has been directed by the White House to go to asteroids. But within this unique collaboration with the Google Lunar X Prize and Pisces, we have found a way to get this technology tested on the surface of the moon for NASA. How cool is that? Plus, having high schools being able to participate in the science of lunar dust and in making some of the hardware that will fly to the surface of the moon.